Hey everybody. First off, we'll say Merry Christmas. It is Christmas Eve here in the desert, and today it's actually raining quite a bit. So it's one of those rare gray days, and I kind of miss those from Kentucky, to be honest. I was always able to be pretty productive during those periods, and it's very sunny here almost all the time, but you could probably expect that, and I knew that going into it. So anyhow, so today what we're going to discuss is part 2 of a 2-part video series I wanted to cover on Battletech. This video is going to discuss the narrative and the eras. Now before I begin, I'd like to make it very clear that I am not a Battletech historian. I am not very deeply knowledgeable about the subject that I'm going to talk about. Meaning I haven't memorized novels and backgrounds and things of that nature. But I know enough on the surface to at least give a primer, and that's the goal of this video, is just to give new players a primer as to what the different eras are and what kind of at their base had going on event-wise. A lot of new players coming in. You've been attracted by the PC games, Battletech or Mech Warrior. You see the models. You're interested in the giant mechs stomping on each other, and there's a desire to know a little bit about the story for some of you, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. Because as a new player myself, which I'm not new to Battletech, I've been around Battletech. Battletech was my first war game, and I started playing it back in 1989, so it's been a long time. But I put most of my efforts into sci-fi gaming or into 40K for a number of years. So I've revisited Battletech several times, and so I have a passing knowledge of the eras and what's going on. Because one of the most common questions I get from people who I know who are interested in it, first, that there's even a narrative involved. And the answer is yes. It's probably the deepest narrative that I can think of in terms of any fantasy or fictional world from wargaming perspective, short of maybe say like Middle Earth. There's just so much to try to get into, and I'm not going to be covering things in extreme depth. I'm just going to be glossing over what the eras mean and what kind of was going on, and tossing some names. So if you're like an old hat at this game and you know a lot about the narrative, most of this is probably not going to interest you very much. If you're a new player and you're interested in understanding just exactly what all these eras are and what do they mean, this may have some interest for you. All of this stuff can be gleaned online. If you Google up Battletech eras, you're going to be taken to the sarna.net site, which has a lot of the information that I've pulled in this slide deck. So you can get as deep as you want to go. When we talk about narratives from a player standpoint, Battletech attracts several different types of players, and we talked about that in the first video with the rule sets and the different ways you can play. There's not one way. Like a lot of games, it's pretty much there's one way that you see online being played. In Battletech, there's multiple ways because the rules offer multiple ways to play. And one of the draws is for historical type gamers to play in certain eras. You're not required to play in eras. A lot of people don't want to play in eras. They just want to play, with what's new and just throw down. And that's great. But if you're into like historicals or want to know if you want to play in certain eras, that's kind of where this is going to be of interest. So let's go ahead and get rolling. All right. So looking at the Battletech eras, there are 6 eras where people play in, and then I have what I call Era 0, which is the prehistory. And actually, Era 0 I have labeled here as the Star League. You can actually go before that, and that's basically the pre-Star League information, which would give you what happened with Earth and whatnot. So if you go all the way back, so let's go to before the Star League. Let's go to like now, like today, 2021. In the 1980s, we had a very optimistic outlook on where we would be as a people in the near future. If you look at movies like Transformers the movie, and that's kind of pertinent just because Battletech, big robots, Transformers, big robots. There's a lot of people are interested in both that I find. But if you watch Transformers the movie, which came out in like 1985 or 1984 or something like that, that takes place in 2005, and it's like this big scientific sci-fi type setting where people had hoverboards and things. Obviously 2005 is long gone. That's like almost 20 years in the past now, and we're nowhere near that. But they had this very optimistic outlook on where we would be. So in Battletech, the planet Earth, which we call Terra, or the Terrans, unified their government in the Battletech universe in 2014, and that created what was called the Terran Alliance. So the whole planet's under one government, right? And by the end of the 21st century, this Terran Alliance included the entire solar system. So we have colonized and set up a government that takes the entire solar system. So space travel is obviously a lot more advanced than it is today to get to that level. But in Battletech, that's where they were. The government, the Terran Alliance, is said to be very oppressive and very, it was not a good place to be in. So in 2235, they have this thing called the Outer Reaches Rebellion happens. And the Outer Reaches is the periphery beyond the solar system. Like we started colonizing planets and systems beyond just our system, beyond the solar system we have here. And the Terran Alliance was defeated in that rebellion, and they abandoned all of the colonies that were more than one jump away. And a jump is 30 light years. So anything beyond a jump, they're like, nah, we don't care about this. And that happened in 2242. So after that defeat, they grew even more brutal, but the government was very inefficient. And in 2315, a man by the name of Admiral James McKenna overthrew it and formed what was called the Terran Hegemony, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. It's a type of government. This is where the great houses began to form, and the type of government that was constant here is neo-feudalism. So feudalism itself being the Middle Ages type government. So you have like kings and barons and landowners, and then you have the serfs and the people working the land in exchange for being able to live on the land. Neo-feudalism is actually a type of government you can research today. It's taking those principles, and there's a few things they build on top of that. But so essentially, that's your government a couple hundred years in the future in the Battletech universe. Then we have the Ares Convention coming to existence in 2412, and the Ares Convention is kind of like the Geneva Convention. It regulates warfare. And in 2439, the very first battle mech rolls off the assembly line. It's called the Mackie. So that's your prehistory. Then you have the Star League forming in what I call Era Zero. And the Star League, with all the houses coming together and forming the centralized government for the area of space. Era 1 begins where people mostly start playing, and that is your succession wars. And that's where you'll see, like, the introductory box set takes place in 3039, and that takes place in the late succession wars. And I've got it highlighted in yellow just because that is a very popular time or era that you'll see people play in, at least I have found. And a lot of the PC games are set here or very close to this era or this point in time. In Era 2, we have what are called the clans. And the clans come invading the inner sphere. And this lasts from 3050 to 3061. This is your tech level 2 stuff. This is your clan mechs, your omni-mechs. Era 3, we have the Fedcom Civil War era. Then we have, while the Civil War is ripping itself apart, this faction called the Word of Blake appears, and they create the Jihad, and there is a war for Terra, basically, and the Word of Blake sitting in the center of everything before they're finally defeated, and we move into Era 5, which is the Republic era, which fades into a Dark Age. And this is kind of where we've been stuck at for a great number of years in real time in our life, in this timeline. They finally advanced the timeline into Era 6, which is the Ill Clan. And this, what it appears to be, is that the clans are now all driving towards Terra to reclaim their birthright. So I'm going to kind of touch on each of these pointers. We're just going to dive into a little bit of what happened in each of these eras. And again, why this is important. If you're playing in a historical type group or a group that wants to play in certain eras, it matters just to know what's going on around you. It also matters to know what year you're playing and what tech is available to you at this time. Because if you're playing, for example, in the late Succession Wars, you don't have access to clan tech. So there's not clan mechs running around. Unless you're specifically playing in a campaign or a group that's using, like they're off in the periphery forming the clans, because that's a whole different storyline. All right, so let's start with the Star League Defense Force, or the SLDF. The Star League Defense Force was formed in 2571, and this was created by a man named Ian Cameron, and he took the Terran hegemony and the great houses of the Inner Sphere and the territorial states of the periphery and formed the Star League Defense Force. So the Inner Sphere, just to define, and we're going to see a map of this, is an area of space within the Milky Way galaxy with Terra, or Earth, at its very center. It's actually very small in terms of a galactic scale. The periphery is known as the space surrounding the Inner Sphere. So if the Inner Sphere represents this little area here, any world that's outside of that is considered the periphery. If you like Star Wars, it's like the Outer Rim. The periphery revolted in 2765, resulting in a civil war. A very important figure named Alexander Kerensky and the Star League Defense Force defeated Amaris, but in the aftermath, the Star League itself was ruined. Kerensky took the SLDF shortly after, and they left the Inner Sphere in exile, and they went off to the periphery. Now, this is very, very important because this SLDF force eventually becomes the clans, which I talked about briefly. They're going to invade in the, several centuries later. They're going to reform and invade. So the Star League goes through different phases. So it's the Star League in exile, you have the clans, you have the second Star League forming, and then you have the third Star League. So in the entire span of Battletech, throughout all the eras, you have they're in exile, then they're forming clans in 2807. They're creating the second Star League. This is the Civil War era, which actually has nothing to do with the clans. It's the Inner Sphere forming it. And then you have the third Star League, which is basically modern time Battletech today. Source books you have available. There are a number of books you can. What I'm doing in these slides is just showing you some books that I own that I found useful. There are others, so this is not an exhaustive list. But if you wanted to get into your history with the Star League Defense Force, you have Field Manual SLDF, which breaks down how the military was handled in the Star League. You have a historical book called The Reunification Wars, which goes over a certain era of the Star League Defense Force. And then you have The Liberation of Terra, Volumes 1 and 2. Quite a great amount of information can be had on the prehistory of Battletech, if you're so inclined to read it. This slide here shows you where the Inner Sphere is. This is the Milky Way galaxy, and that tiny little dot represents the entirety of the Inner Sphere. So everything we're talking about is contained in this little dot. So it's not galactic scale, it's still very small. So then we get into the major houses of the Battletech universe. So we have factions. Just like 40K has factions and Infinity has factions, so too does Battletech. The big thing you'll find with factions in Battletech is that there aren't really special rules for each faction. And what that does is basically everyone's on an even keel. They do have mechs that were favored by factions. So if you're playing in a group that likes its historical bend, they will often, like if someone says I'm playing House Steiner, they're going to have mechs that were majorly fielded by House Steiner. But technically you can really come up with a backstory for anything to justify anything. These houses are known as the successor states. These are the successors of the Star League, and these are the major powers at play. And one thing these states love is to fight each other all the time. And that's kind of why Battletech exists. It's a game of war. And you have pretty much constant war. These guys are constantly ripping each other apart. So each one of these is modeled after a certain culture in our own history. So we have House Liao, which is also called the Capellan Confederation. These guys are modeled after the Han Chinese dynasty. This is a socialist state. Its people work for the good of the state. It is disparaged by the other successor states as a totalitarian police state. Second house we have is House Steiner, also called the Lyran Commonwealth. This is the greatest economic power of the five. This was formed in 2340, and it's based on Germanic imagery and trappings. This house has prospered even during the worst of times because of its strong economic base that it sits over. The third house we have is House Davion, and also known as the Federated Sons, formed in 2317. Its capital is called New Avalon, and it's based on Anglo-French background. This is one of the largest and most powerful military factions of the five successor states. It sees itself as the champion of freedom, democracy, and human rights. The reality, however, is not so clear-cut. The pursuit of scientific knowledge has been strongly encouraged by Davion leadership, and the New Avalon Institute of Science becomes the premier research and development center of the 31st century. However, like any of these you're going to find, there are no good guys in Battletech. There are no true champions of anything in Battletech. Everyone's got their own agenda. It's not grimdark like 40K, but there are no true good guys, I would argue. The next state we have is House Merit, also known as the Free Worlds League. This is the oldest state, founded in 2271 after the Terran Alliance collapsed. It is the only successor state to lay claim on paper to a true democracy. House Merit relies on free trade and technological advancement to keep pace with its rivals. Ultimately, House Merrick will choose to side with the Word of Blake later on down the line, which helps lead to its destruction. The last house we have is House Kurita. I can't pronounce some of these, so we're going to call it Kurita. And the Draconis Combine. This is the only house that claims its right to rule the entire Inner Sphere. This is based off of Japanese culture founded in 2319. It embraces the way of the warrior, has a long history of antagonism and aggression against its neighbors. Very much for personal honor and self-reliance bordering on xenophobia. And these things are encouraged. So these are the five major houses of the Battletech world. You don't have to ally yourself with any of them. I like to play mercenary campaigns where I basically will help or fight any of these, as well as a whole slew. There's a bunch of minor powers as well that you can ally yourself with, but these are the five major ones. And in the time of the Star League, this is the map of how things are. So the Terran hegemony, I can't pronounce that word. Hegemony is in the center, and then you have the five successor states around it. This leads us to the first set of conflict between the inner spheres, the first major set of conflicts. These are called the succession wars, and there are 4 total succession wars. These are, as stated in the background, some of the most horrific wars that mankind has ever inflicted upon itself. And it is through these wars that we take our technological brilliance and we destroy it. And we lead ourselves down a path to where we can't recreate any of the cool things that we had created up to this point. Because these wars destroy our capability of our knowledge, our scientific advancements. We're targeting, these houses are targeting those centers so that we can't wage war anymore, basically. Most of the Star League Defense Force left the Inner Sphere in 2184. And that power vacuum created the 5 successor states going, well, the Star League is gone. Who's going to be daddy now? And so they fought over who's going to be daddy. Comstar emerges from the last surviving ministry of the Star League and becomes a pseudo-religious order. And they're centered around Terra. They're in the middle, and they are responsible for the communications throughout the entire inner sphere. And you'll see that they actually, the word of Blake is kind of related to Comstar, which comes later in the Jihad era. The First Succession War lasts from 2786 to 2821. The Second Succession War kicks off 9 years later and goes from 2830 to 2864. And again, these wars are stated to be horrifically brutal. By the end of the Second War, several areas of knowledge and technology are lost. Much of our technology becomes akin to magic to a lot of people. And of course, not to be outdone, we have the Third Succession War starting in 2866, so 2 years later. These guys love to fight each other. That's pretty much what they live for, is fighting each other, and constant political intrigue. And the map, if you look at the map, you're going to see it constantly shifting around because the power ebbs and flows with the different houses. Source books here, if you want to dig deep. The First Succession War and the Second Succession War. These are books entirely focused on those periods. So if you wanted to fight in those periods, you have enough material to do so. Now we move into the late Succession War period. And this is going to be a time where some PC games are set, like 3010-ish. This is where some people start their Battletech journey, is in this era. I myself am getting ready to kick off a mercenary campaign that starts in 3010 and will move throughout the late Succession Wars into the future. They call this the Lost Tech era because any advanced technology that's found is considered lost tech. The Third Succession War is a much lower intensity war, and because we've lost so much of our tech and our military equipment, combat begins growing more ritualized, and they begin to fight duels. So instead of having these full-on wars, we start to resolve our conflicts with duels, and whoever wins the duel, their side wins. The preservation of technology becomes very important at this point in time. Now, coming to the end of Tech Era 1, or Era 1, I should say, and sometimes I'll say Tech Era 1, Tech Era 2. When I started Battletech, that's how the people around me referred to the eras. We didn't call them the Succession Wars. We just said Tech Level 1, Tech Level 2. I don't know where that originated from or if that's even still a thing. I don't really see it, but I sometimes slip into calling it that. So if you hear me say that, that's really what I'm meaning. The late Succession Wars to the Renaissance. This is 3020 to 3049. This is where the box sets start you off. And this is where a lot of MechWarrior and Battletech PC games start you off, is here. And I mean the modern MechWarrior, MechWarrior 5. The predated ones have the clans in them, so that has to be later on in the future. But if we're talking about today, because MechWarrior 4, I believe, came out in like 2000, so you're talking like a 21-year-old game. So I'm talking about today. This is the era that those games start you in. The Third Succession War ends in 3025. And in fact, the the technical readout started many years ago at 3025. So TRO 3025 was where you would pick up your first technical readout. And that got moved to 3039 eventually. The Fourth Succession War begins in 3028. So there's not really a lot of time of peace between these dates. This only lasts a couple of years and ends in 3030. Some important things that happen. The Grey Death Legion discovers the Helm memory core on the world of Helm in 3028. This is a library. It opens up a lot of this lost tech now suddenly makes sense. There is a campaign set on Helm that you can play. It's called a Turning Point Helm, which I've noted down here at the bottom of the slide. And there's also the Living Legend novels in Battletech. Book 1 is all about Grayson and the Death Legion being formed. And if you're interested in like picking up novels to understand the story from a fictional point of view, those novels are a great place to start. So check that out. The Price of Glory novel is the third book in the Grey Legion saga, and that's actually them on Helm uncovering this memory core. By 3049, we're about ready to go back to war. The 5th succession war is about to happen. Either that's going to happen, or the new Star League will form under the House Steiner-Davian Alliance. But unfortunately for the Inner Sphere, well, maybe fortunately for the Inner Sphere, before this can happen, the clans will come invading. So source books from this period, you have technical readouts. You have the TRO Succession Wars, which is Catalyst, who currently owns, as of this recording, they own Battletech, the rights to publishing Battletech. They have combined TRO's 3039, 3050 upgrade, 3058 upgrade, and 3075 into TRO Succession Wars. I do not understand why these later TROs are included, but they are. If you want to pick up this Succession Wars compilation, just know that it's only the battle mechs and does not include any of the combined arms, so tanks and airplanes and jet fighters and all that are not in those compilations. But it's let you pick up the era all in one and get the information you need. Alternatively, if you're like me and you play combined arms, you have TRO 3039. And actually it's TRO 3039 unabridged, I believe, or upgrade or something like that. And I could be wrong on that. These can get confusing because there's so many. But this technical readout gives you, it's a very large book on all of the vehicles and mechs and their background. You have Scenario Pack, the 4th Succession War, Volume 1. So if you want to play Battletech scenarios in the 4th Succession War, this is what you'd pick up. You have Historical War of 3039, which goes over the entire war of that war in depth. You have the Mercenaries Handbook is in this era. And then you have Campaign Turning Points, Vega and Helm, and a bunch of others. But I have Vega and Helm, and I've played those. So again, these are the source books that I have used to kind of immerse myself in this era. And here you have the map of what's going on, how things have changed from 3025 to 3040. And you can see things ebb and flow. In this case, the Lyran Commonwealth and the Federated Suns became the Federated Commonwealth. That leads us to Tech Era 2, the Clan Invasion. The Clan Invasion is another very popular starting point for players. Because if the Inner Sphere, so the Inner Sphere is one major faction, which is composed of the 5 successor states and all the minor houses. The clan is the second major faction. Clans come in with advanced technology and their own mech designs, the Omni-mechs. And so this appeals to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. So you may find yourself playing in this era, starting off, or you play in this era regardless. The clans are descended from the remnants of the Star League. General Alexander Kerensky, when they went in exile, went into the periphery and were in hiding and basically forming the clans for several hundred years. After much infighting, Nicholas Kerensky takes command of the exiles and turns them into 20 clans of warriors. These clans have superior weapons, unique mech designs, the Omni-mechs, and elemental infantry, which are basically like space marines or power armored infantrymen. They have been bred and designed genetically for war. Some major points of this era, you have the Battle of I can't pronounce that, Takaid, the Takaid battle. And this is where ultimately Comstar's military wins, and a truce is called, which halts the invaders for 15 years. It is during this time that the successor states of the Inner Sphere began upgrading their armies. During the Battle of Coventry in 3058, successor states forged the Second Star League. They forged it with a specific purpose of destroying or stopping the clan invasion. Operation Bulldog and Task Force Serpent annihilate one of the clans, Smoke Jaguar, so they're totally erased. After this reborn Star League Defense Force wins the Great Refusal, and the other clans agree to end the invasion permanently. The Great Refusal is a ritualistic, it's like a tournament that the clans hold. And so the champions of both sides met and fought in different scenarios, basically. And the Star League, they won the vast majority of those contests. So the clans agreed basically to stop at that point. Source books, you have TRO Clan Invasion. This is the second compilation that they have produced. And again, only mechs, but it compiles a number of TROs into one book. Alternately, if you care about combined arms, you have the TRO's 3050 upgrade, 3058 upgrade, 3060, and Project Phoenix. Project Phoenix allowed rules to be written for what were called the unseen. There was a lawsuit, essentially, between the owners of Battletech and Robotech, and they went back and forth in court. Anyhow, any of the designs that were shared or driven or came from those Robotech designs were removed, and they were called the unseen. Project Phoenix lets you have rules for them. That has since been resolved, and those mechs are now re-seen, and you can see them in the newest sculpts and whatnot, but that's what Project Phoenix is. You have Error Report 3052, which is a deep book on the happenings that are going on at this time, and then the Mercenaries Handbook 3055. Any of those source books get into super depth at that period in time. So if you're playing a campaign in the clan era, reading the Error Report, knowing in deep depth what's going on, helps you create some cool scenarios that are apt for the time period. So in 3052, this is the map of the inner sphere. You can see up here, the clan invasion has claimed large swaths of territory. We have Jade Falcon and Steel Viper claiming here, Clan Wolf, Clan Ghost Bear, and then Clan Smoke Jaguar Novacat. By 3057, you can see that the I can't pronounce these words, the Federated Commonwealth, I should say, is now split back into the Terran Alliance and the Federated Commonwealth. And then we have this thing called the Chaos March that has appeared. The Chaos March is a series of worlds located near Terra, which are under they're changing hands all the time. And so that was dubbed the Chaos March because of that constant change back and forth. And right here we have a list of all the different clans, the first clans. I'm not going to read this list to you, but what we can look at are, you're going to see some of these clans a lot more than others. There's some that are more popular. Jade Falcon, for example, has their own source book you can get. Clan Wolf, big one. Hell's Horses is an offshoot of Wolf, pretty big one. Ghost Bear is a pretty big one. But really, you can get information on any of these clans, and if anything that really appeals to you, they all have their different personalities and whatnot. You can find color schemes and really go deep into what clan you want to represent. And once the clan invasion is halted, we have the Fedcom Civil War. And in the Fedcom Civil War, basically the inner sphere is like, cool, we took care of that, we're done. Now we're going to go back to war with ourselves. And they do. And so the Second Star League is dissolved in 3067. And again, one of the most devastating wars to ever take place in the inner sphere begins. They like to use that a lot, so I don't know. I don't really if the succession wars are supposed to be the most horrific and brutal, but then this is also supposed to be some of the most devastating. We'll just say that everything that they're doing is just brutality maxed out. Towards the end of the Civil War, the Word of Blake forms and seizes Terra from Comstar. And the Word of Blake is going to play out in the next era. With the Fedcom Civil War, they say this was not a traditional war. So we didn't have like normal front lines and battles and whatnot. The Civil War took place amongst its own garrisoned units. Like units would tear themselves apart because they were fighting. They were basically either loyal to Victor Steiner or Catherine Steiner Davion, because that's the split. They were the two major powers, and they didn't like each other. And so that's essentially the crux of the Civil War. There's obviously a whole lot more that goes into that, and there are books written about the subject, but that's essentially what's going on here. Various mercenary companies are drawn in and destroyed, so I'm looking forward to like my own mercenary campaign when we get to this era, because we're going to be busy. The Draconis Combine becomes involved when a renegade Draconis March units launch attacks on Curitan territory, so that's a civil war unto itself. The Draconis Combine is fighting itself. The Capellan Confederation uses the war to its own advantage. And Clan Jade Falcon attacks the Terran Alliance to test its own troops. So there's a lot going on during the Fedcom Civil War. Source books, you have TRO 3067, the technical readout, and you have Error Report 3062, as well as a book entirely written on the Fedcom Civil War in a book called The Fall of Terra, which all detail the events of the Fedcom Civil War. Now at this point, this video has gotten pretty long, so I'm going to go ahead and cut it right here. And the idea will be when we return, so we'll have part 2B. In part 2B, we're going to look at the Jihad and the Republic era, Dark Age, and the current state of Battletech. So if you have any questions, comments, please post them in the comment section. I'm sure that there's several things I may have misspoken on or did not get into enough detail on, but again, I'm trying to gloss over the very top of Battletech and move through the eras in a way just to kind of give a very loose summary of the events that happened. So thank you for sticking around for this long and watching. I'd like to hear your Battletech stories. If you have them, please leave comments in there or post in the Discord or the Facebook. I like both of those as good places to reach out and communicate. That's all I got today. Have a good holiday, and I will see you very soon to wrap up this series. Until then, see ya.